The airline counter smelled like cheap coffee and desperation. But nobody expected the old lady in the floral scarf to light the fuse. By noon, the terminal would be a battlefield, and she'd be holding the biggest weapon of all. Evelyn Carter, 78, stood at the check-in counter of Horizon Airways, her hands steady despite the tremble in her heart. She'd flown this route Atlanta to DC 100 times, maybe more. Her late husband, Clarence, used to joke she could navigate Hartsfield-Jackson blindfolded. But today, the young agent behind the counter, a kid with a name tag reading Kyle, looked at her like she was a problem to be solved. "Ma'am, I'm sorry, but you're not on this flight," he said, his voice flat, eyes barely meeting hers. "Not on the flight?" Evelyn's tone was sharp but controlled, like a teacher scolding a student who should know better. "I booked this ticket 6 months ago. First class. Confirmation number's right here." She slid her phone across the counter, the screen glowing with her itinerary. Kyle glanced at it, then tapped his keyboard with the enthusiasm of someone defusing a bomb. "System says your seat's been reassigned. Overbooked. Happens sometimes." He shrugged, already looking past her to the next passenger in linea white man in a tailored suit, tapping his foot impatiently. Evelyn's chest tightened. She'd seen this dance before. Decades ago, it was lunch counters and bus seats. Now, apparently, it was first-class cabins. "Overbooked?" she repeated, her voice rising just enough to turn heads. "And you just happened to pick the black woman to bump?" Kyle's face reddened, but his colleague, a woman with a tight blonde bun and a badge that said, "Supervisor," stepped in. "Ma'am, please lower your voice. We don't make decisions based on that. It's just policy." "Policy," Evelyn said, the word dripping with disdain. She leaned forward, her eyes locking onto the supervisor's. "You're telling me it's policy to pull a 78-year-old woman, who's flown with you for 40 years, out of her seat for no reason? You think I don't know what this is?" The terminal was buzzing now, a low hum of whispers and phone cameras clicking. Evelyn felt the weight of every stare, some sympathetic, some annoyed, most just curious. She didn't care. She'd spent a lifetime swallowing slights, smiling through the sting of being overlooked, underestimated, or outright dismissed. Not today. "Ma'am, if you don't step aside, I'll have to call security," the supervisor said, her voice clipped but wavering. Evelyn's laugh was low and bitter. "Call them. Let's make this a show." And a show it became. Within minutes, 2 security officers arrived, their radios crackling. The crowd thickened, a mix of travelers, airport staff, and a few bold enough to start filming. Evelyn stood her ground, her small frame radiating a quiet fury that silenced the chatter. "I'm not moving," she said, her voice steady as granite. "Not until you tell me why I'm being singled out." The supervisor's face hardened. "You're causing a disturbance. That's why." "No," Evelyn shot back. "You caused this when you decided my ticket wasn't worth the paper it's printed on." She reached into her purse, pulling out a folder of documents. "You want to talk policy? Let's talk about the $800 million my foundation pledged to your airline's community outreach program last year. You know, the one that's supposed to make you look like you care about people like me." The air in the terminal shifted. Kyle froze mid-type. The supervisor's mouth opened, then closed. The man in the suit behind Evelyn stopped tapping his foot. Even the security officers hesitated, exchanging glances. Evelyn Carter wasn't just any passenger. She was Dr. Evelyn Carter, founder of the Carter Equity Fund, a powerhouse nonprofit that had funneled billions into education, healthcare, and corporate accountability over the past 3 decades. Her name was on plaques in boardrooms and community centers across the country. and Horizon Airways had just stepped on a landmine. "Ma'am," the supervisor stammered, "I'm sure we can resolve this." "Resolve it?" Evelyn cut her off, her voice rising now, carrying the weight of years of frustration. "You don't resolve treating someone like they're less than human. You don't resolve a system that picks and chooses who gets respect based on the color of their skin. You fix it, and you start by admitting what you did." The crowd was no longer just watching. A young woman in a hoodie shouted, "Tell her why!" A middle-aged man in a baseball cap muttered, "This is messed up." The phones kept recording, and Evelyn knew this moment was bigger than her. It was about every person who'd ever been pushed aside, told to wait, told they didn't belong. She'd been that person her whole life, through Jim Crow, through redlining, through boardrooms where she was the only one who looked like her. But she'd also learned how to fight. The supervisor, now visibly sweating, gestured to the security officers. "Escort her out." The officers stepped forward, but Evelyn raised a hand. "Touch me, and you'll be on every news outlet by tonight," she said, her voice calm but lethal. "You think I don't know how this works? I've got lawyers who'd eat this story alive. And I've got a board meeting tomorrow where I can pull every cent of that $800 million. Your choice." The terminal was dead silent now, save for the distant hum of a departing plane. The supervisor's eyes darted to Kyle, then to the officers, then back to Evelyn. She was trapped, and she knew it. The man in the suit behind Evelyn cleared his throat. "You heard her," he said, his voice surprisingly soft. "Fix this." Evelyn didn't look at him. She didn't need allies now, she needed answers. But the crowd was growing bolder, their murmurs turning into demands. "Let her fly," someone yelled. "Give her back her seat," another added. The energy was electric, a spark away from chaos. The supervisor finally cracked. Okay, she said, raising her hands. "We'll get you on the flight, Dr. Carter. There's been a misunderstanding." "A misunderstanding," Evelyn repeated, her voice low and dangerous. "That's what you call it when you humiliate someone in front of 100 strangers? When you make them feel like they don't belong?" She shook her head, her scarf slipping slightly to reveal gray curls. "I'm not just getting on that plane. I'm going to make sure this never happens again, not to me, not to anyone." She turned to the crowd, her eyes scanning the sea of faces. "You all saw this," she said, her voice carrying like a preacher's. "You saw what they tried to do. Don't let them forget it. Don't let them hide behind policy or misunderstandings. This is about respect. This is about dignity. And I'm done letting people take that from us." The crowd erupted, some cheering, some clapping, a few still filming. Evelyn didn't smile. She wasn't here for applause. She was here for justice. And she wasn't done yet. By the time Evelyn boarded the flight, the video of the confrontation had already hit X, racking up thousands of views. Hashtags like Evelyn Carter and Horizon Airways were trending, and the comments were a mix of outrage and admiration. "This is why we need to keep fighting," one user wrote. "Dr. Carter's a legend," said another. But Evelyn wasn't checking her phone. She was sitting in her first-class seat, reinstated after a flurry of panicked calls from Horizon's corporate office, staring out the window as Atlanta's skyline faded into the clouds. She wasn't thinking about the victory, though. She was thinking about her mother, who'd scrubbed floors to send her to college. About Clarence, who'd marched in Selma and never let her forget the cost of silence. About the kids her foundation supported, who deserved a world where they wouldn't have to fight these same battles. This wasn't just about a seat. It was about a system that still saw people like her as less. Back at the airport, the supervisor, whose name was Karen, was on the phone with her regional manager. trying to explain why a routine overbooking had spiraled into a PR nightmare. She didn't tell us who she was, Karen protested, her voice shaking. She shouldn't have to, the manager snapped. You think a woman like that needs to flash her credentials to get treated like a human being? Karen didn't answer. She was already imagining the headlines, the lawsuits, the fallout. Horizon Airways had built its brand on inclusivity, plastering ads with diverse faces and feel-good slogans. But Evelyn Carter had just exposed the gap between their promises and their actions. And she wasn't done. By the time the plane landed in D.C., Evelyn's phone was buzzing with notifications. Her assistant, Maya, had forwarded a dozen messages from reporters, activists, and even a senator's office. Dr. Carter, Maya's text read, "You're trending everywhere. What do you want to do next?" Evelyn didn't reply right away. She was tired not just from the flight, but from a lifetime of moments like this. She'd built the Carter Equity Fund to fight systemic racism, to give people a chance at the opportunities she'd clawed her way to. But today reminded her how far there was still to go. Horizon Airways wasn't just one bad plight, was a symptom of a world that still defaulted to exclusion. She stepped off the plane, her scarf now neatly retied, her folder of documents tucked under her arm. The DC terminal was quieter than Atlanta's, but she could still feel eyes on her. A young black woman in a janitor's uniform caught her gaze and gave a small nod, the kind that said, "I see you. Thank you." Evelyn nodded back, a silent promise. The next morning, Evelyn sat at the head of a conference table in a sleek DC office, facing the board of the Carter Equity Fund. The room was filled with heavyweights philanthropists, CEOs, a former governor, but all eyes were on her. The Horizon incident was already national news, and the board was buzzing with questions. "I'm pulling the funding," Evelyn said, her voice calm but final. "All $800 million. Effective immediately." A murmur rippled through the room. One board member, a white man in his 60s named Richard, leaned forward. "Evelyn, are you sure? That's a huge move. Horizon's outreach program does good work." "Good work." Evelyn's eyes narrowed. "They use our money to polish their image while treating people like me, like us, like we're disposable. That's not partnership. That's exploitation." Another board member, a younger woman named Aisha, nodded. "She's right. We can't fund a company that undermines our mission. What's the point of giving them money to support communities if they're humiliating those same communities at their counters?" Richard hesitated, then sighed. "Okay, but this will make waves. Big ones." "Let it," Evelyn said. "If Horizon wants our money, they'll have to earn it. Starting with an apology not to me, but to every passenger they've ever treated like they don't matter." The board voted unanimously to pull the funding. By the end of the day, the news was everywhere. Carter Equity Fund withdraws $800 million from Horizon Airways after discrimination scandal. X was ablaze with reactions, from calls for a boycott to demands for federal investigations. Horizon stock plummeted 12% in hours. Their PR team scrambled, issuing a statement about reviewing internal policies. But it was too late. Evelyn Carter had struck a blow, and the world was watching. Back in Atlanta, Kyle was on his lunch break, scrolling through X and wincing at the comments under a video of the confrontation. "This dude really thought he could just shrug it off," one user wrote. "Fire him and his boss. Kyle hadn't meant for things to escalate. He'd just followed protocol, picked the passenger with the least status to bump. How was he supposed to know she was a multimillion-dollar donor?" But deep down, he knew that wasn't the point. He'd looked at Evelyn and seen someone he could dismiss. And now the whole world knew it. Karen, the supervisor, wasn't faring much better. She'd been suspended pending an investigation, and her inbox was flooded with hate mail. She sat in her apartment, staring at the TV as a news anchor dissected the incident. "This isn't just about one flight," the anchor said. "It's about a culture that lets these moments happen." Dr. Evelyn Carter isn't just fighting for herself, she's fighting for everyone who's been told they don't belong. Karen turned off the TV, her hands shaking. She'd always thought of herself as fair, as someone who followed the rules. But now she wondered if the rules themselves were the problem. Evelyn didn't watch the news. She didn't need to. She was already planning her next move. The $800 million would be redirected to grassroots organizations, groups that didn't just talk about equity but lived it. She thought of the young woman in the janitor's uniform, the nod they'd shared. That was who she was fighting for. But the fight wasn't over. Horizon Airways was just one battle in a much bigger war. Evelyn knew the system wouldn't change overnight, but she also knew the power of a single moment. That day in the terminal, she turned a routine injustice into a rallying cry, and she wasn't done. As she sat in her DC hotel room, drafting a statement for the press, her phone buzzed again. It was Maya, forwarding a message from a young activist who'd seen the video. "Dr. Carter," it read, "you gave me hope today. Thank you for standing up." Evelyn smiled, just a little. Hope was a start. But she wasn't after hope, she was after change. And she'd keep fighting until it came. Evelyn Carter's hotel room was a sanctuary of quiet amidst the storm she'd unleashed. The DC skyline glittered outside her window, but her focus was on the laptop screen, where she typed a press release with deliberate precision. Every word was a bullet, aimed not just at Horizon Airways but at the broader system that allowed moments like the one in the terminal to persist. She wasn't naive, she knew pulling $800 million was a power move. But it was only the beginning. Real change required more than money. It required accountability, and she was determined to demand it. By the next morning, Horizon Airways' corporate office was in damage control mode. Their CEO, Jonathan Hargrove, a man known for his polished speeches and carefully curated public image, called an emergency press conference. The room was packed with reporters, their cameras trained on him as he adjusted his tie and cleared his throat. "We deeply regret the incident involving Dr. Evelyn Carter," he began, his voice smooth but strained. "Horizon Airways is committed to inclusivity, and we're conducting a full investigation to ensure this never happens again." Evelyn watched the live stream from her hotel, her lips pressed into a thin line. She'd heard this script before, corporate apologies that promised change but delivered little. She muted the video and turned to Maya, who was scrolling through X on her phone. "They're calling it the Carter effect," Maya said, her eyes bright with excitement. "People are sharing stories of being bumped from flights, ignored in stores, profiled in airports. It's like you opened a floodgate." Evelyn nodded, but her expression was grim. "That's the problem, Maya. It's not just one floodgate, it's a whole dam, and it's been holding back people's pain for generations." She leaned back in her chair, her fingers tracing the edge of her scarf. "This isn't about me. It's about making sure the next person doesn't have to go through this." Maya hesitated, then set her phone down. "Dr. Carter, some people on X are saying you're overreacting, that it was just a mix-up, not racism. They're saying you're using your influence to bully the airline." Evelyn's laugh was sharp, almost a bark. "Bully? They think a 78-year-old woman standing up for her dignity is bullying? Let them say it. They're just scared because I have the power to make them listen." She paused, her eyes softening. "But we need to be careful, Maya. This can't just be noise. We need to channel it into something real: policies, training, consequences. Otherwise, it's just another trending hashtag." Maya nodded, typing notes on her tablet. "What's the next step then?" Evelyn tapped her folder of documents. the same one she'd carried into the terminal. We start with Horizon. They don't get to sweep this under the rug. I want a public commitment to overhaul their booking and customer service protocols. I want independent auditors to review their practices for bias. And I want them to fund scholarships for young people from marginalized communities, not as a PR stunt, but as a real investment. Maya grinned. You're going to make them squirm. They should, Evelyn said. They built their brand on our backs, then treated us like we don't matter. Time to pay up. Over the next week, the Carter effect rippled outward. X was a battleground of opinions, some praising Evelyn as a hero, others accusing her of playing the race card. A viral thread from a former Horizon employee claimed overbooking decisions often targeted low-priority passengers, a category that suspiciously overlapped with people of color, elderly travelers, and those with cheaper tickets. The thread sparked a wave of lawsuits, with dozens of passengers coming forward with similar stories. Evelyn's inbox overflowed with messages, some from supporters, others from trolls calling her everything from a troublemaker to worse. She didn't read the hate mail. Instead, she focused on the stories that mattered. A black teenager who'd been denied boarding on a flight to a college interview. A Latino family bumped from a connecting flight and stranded for days. An elderly Asian man who'd been treated like a criminal for asking about his seat. Each story was a reminder that her fight wasn't just personal, it was universal. Horizon Airways, under mounting pressure, agreed to meet with Evelyn. The meeting was held in a sterile conference room in their Atlanta headquarters, with Hargrove and a team of executives facing Evelyn, Maya, and two of her foundation's lawyers. The air was thick with tension. Every word weighed like evidence in a courtroom. Dr. Carter, Hargrove began, his tone conciliatory. We're prepared to reinstate the $800 million in funding and issue a public apology. We've also suspended the employees involved in the incident. Evelyn's eyes narrowed. Suspended? That's your solution? Slap a wrist and call it justice. She leaned forward, her voice steady but searing. Those employees didn't invent your system, they followed it. You want my trust back? Fix the system. Train your staff to see people, not profiles. Audit your algorithms to stop them from flagging people like me as low priority. And don't think you can buy me off with my own money. Hargrove shifted uncomfortably. We're open to suggestions, Dr. Carter. What exactly are you proposing? I'm not proposing, Evelyn said. I'm demanding. You commit to a 5-year plan for equity training, audited by an independent firm we approve. You fund 100 scholarships a year for students from underrepresented communities. No strings attached. And you publish a report every quarter on how you're handling overbooking complaints, broken down by race, age, and gender. Transparency, Mr. Hargrove. That's the price of doing business with me. The executives exchanged glances. One of them, a woman named Laura who oversaw PR, spoke up. Dr. Carter, we appreciate your passion, but this is ambitious. Could take years to implement. Evelyn's smile was cold. I've waited 78 years for this country to treat me like I belong. You can wait a few more months to get it right. The room fell silent. Hargrove cleared his throat. We'll need to discuss this internally, but I assure you, we're taking this seriously. You'd better, Evelyn said, because the world's watching, and so am I. As weeks turned into months, Horizon Airways began to bend. They issued a detailed apology, not just to Evelyn but to all passengers affected by their practices. They hired a consulting firm to overhaul their training, though Evelyn insisted on approving the curriculum herself. The scholarships were launched, named the Carter Scholars Program, with the first recipients announced at a gala where Evelyn gave the keynote speech. She stood at the podium, her scarf now a symbol of defiance, and spoke to a room of young faces, Black, Latino, Native, Asian. all of them watching her with a mix of awe and hope. "You are the future," she told them. "Not because of what you've been given, but because of what you'll demand. Don't let anyone tell you your worth is less than theirs. You fight for your place, and you hold the door open for the next person." The applause was thunderous, but Evelyn's mind was elsewhere. She thought of her mother, who'd never lived to see a world where her daughter could move mountains. She thought of Clarence, who'd taught her that courage wasn't loud, it was steady. And she thought of the terminal where a single moment had sparked a movement. But the fight wasn't over. Horizon's changes were a start, but Evelyn knew systemic racism didn't vanish with a press release or a scholarship fund. She kept pushing, meeting with other airlines, lawmakers, and activists to demand industry-wide reforms. The Carter Equity Fund launched a campaign called Fly Equal, encouraging passengers to share their stories of discrimination and hold airlines accountable. X became a platform for those stories, with Fly Equal trending alongside Evelyn Carter. Back in Atlanta, Kyle had quit Horizon, unable to shake the guilt of that day. He'd taken a job at a coffee shop, where he spent his breaks reading about systemic bias and trying to understand where he'd gone wrong. Karen, the supervisor, had been fired after the investigation confirmed she'd ignored complaints about biased practices for years. She moved to a new city, but the weight of her role in the incident followed her. Evelyn didn't dwell on them. She was too busy planning the next battle. Her foundation partnered with civil rights organizations to draft legislation for stricter oversight of airline practices. She testified before Congress, her voice steady as she recounted not just her story but the thousands she'd heard since. "This isn't about one flight," she told the lawmakers. "It's about a system that decides who gets to soar and who gets left on the ground. You have the power to change that. Use it." The bill passed narrowly, but it was a victory. Airlines were now required to report discrimination complaints publicly and face fines for patterns of bias. It wasn't perfect, but it was as steep a step Evelyn had forced into existence. On the one-year anniversary of the incident, Evelyn returned to Hartsfield-Jackson Airport, not to fly, but to speak at a rally organized by Fly Equal. The terminal was packed with supporters, their signs reading "Dignity over Profit" and "No More Excuses." The wooden signboard from that fateful day had been preserved, now displayed as a symbol of resistance. Its handwritten message, "Racism costs more than a seat," etched into history. Evelyn took the stage, her scarf vibrant against the gray backdrop of the airport. "A year ago, I stood right here," she began, her voice carrying over the crowd. "I stood here and said, 'Enough,' and you all said it with me. You shared your stories. You demanded change. You reminded the world that justice isn't given, it's taken." The crowd roared, but Evelyn raised a hand, quieting them. "But we're not done. Not until every person can walk through this terminal or any terminal and know they belong. Not until respect is the rule, not the exception. So keep fighting, keep speaking, keep holding them accountable. Because if we don't, nothing changes." As she stepped down, a young man approached her, his phone in hand. "Dr. Carter," he said, "I'm writing about this for my college paper. Can I ask what you think this moment means for us? For the future?" Evelyn looked at him, then at the crowd, their faces a mosaic of hope and determination. "It means we're waking up," she said. "It means we're learning that justice isn't just about being right, it's about being heard. Keep asking the hard questions, young man, and don't stop until you get answers." That night, Evelyn sat in her DC office, the city quiet outside. She opened X and scrolled through the latest posts under Fly Equal. Some were stories of Progress Airlines adopting new policies, passengers feeling empowered to speak up. Others were reminders of how far there was to go. New incidents, new injustices. She closed her laptop, her heart heavy but resolute. The Carter effect had changed the conversation, but conversations alone didn't change the world. It would take more rallies, more laws, more voices. Evelyn knew she wouldn't see the end of this fight, but she'd laid the foundation for those who would. She thought of the young man's question. What does this moment mean? It meant everything and nothing everything because it had shown the power of one voice, one stand. Nothing because it was just one battle in a war that stretched back centuries. The real test was what came next. What do you think? When does justice start and when does it end? Share your thoughts because this story isn't just my night's ours.